Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Chuck Chapman. He's a a psychotherapist, and life and relationship coach. Welcome to the show, Chuck.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's
You
great
are
to
welcome
be
to
here.
You are welcome to the show, Chuck. You are welcome to India in this online form. And
Thank you.
I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. We'll be talking about men, masculinity, and relationships. So, Chuck, you talk about nice guys.
Right.
And earlier, people generally used to say, or say even sometimes, nice guys finish last.
Right. Right.
So, is there any hope for the nice guys to finish somewhere around the first two, three positions,
I think,
especially in these times when
yeah.
there is so much of talk about masculinity and so many other different things? You are a
Right.
men's coach. I would like to understand things from you, and you yourself call yourself a nice guy. So I want to understand that
Yeah.
also in that backdrop, the recovering nice guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So when we talk about nice guy, what we're really talking about is somebody who is, I would call, fraudulently nice. All right. So they're desperate for approval, and as a result of that, they go around being nice and helpful and that kind of thing. But they're doing it not from a means of like, I really want to be helpful. They're doing it from an approval seeking type of thing. So for example, nice guys will oftentimes, you ask them to do something and they're like, oh yeah, sure, happy to do that. They really don't want to, and so what do? They do kind of a half measure job. They don't really do a great job, or they don't show up, or they have an excuse or something like that. And so the nice guy ends up being not really nice because he's not honest. He's not forthright. Instead, he tells people what he thinks they want to hear so that they'll like and love him. And the nice guy has, I would say, a belief system. And the belief system is this: that early on in his life, he felt unlovable and acceptable just the way that he is. And as a result of that, he started learning how to kind of fake it in the world. And oftentimes this happens when we have, family systems, our childhood, maybe growing up in a system where, you know, uh, mom is always upset. And so we learned that if other people are upset, it's my job to make them unupset. And then what that does is I really lose a sense of myself. And as a result of that, I start this nice guy behavior, which is, like I said, fraudulently nice. And then what ends up happening is the very thing I'm afraid of happening, which is people not liking me, ends up happening because I'm not really authentic and living from a place of integrity. I'm living from a place of trying to people please. So the nice guy is really a people pleaser.
Right, right. So this nice guy is different than the earlier nice guys. So how do you make them not so nice, but then really nice in the right term?
Yeah,
As a men's coach, it's a very difficult
yeah,
work for you
for
because
sure.
everything about niceness has, become so topsy turvy. I would say.
Yeah, exactly. And when you think about it like this, is that it, there's a difference between being nice and good. It's kind of the way I draw from it. Okay, so nice is I'm giving to get. I want something from you. Whereas good is I'm just a good person and I want to help out. So the line is really short. Now, what oftentimes happens is people will think, well, I don't want to be a nice guy. So what am I going to do? I'm going to do the opposite of being a nice guy, which is I'm going to turn into a jerk. I'm going to turn into somebody who's just like, I'm just going to go out there and just like everybody's going to, do what I say, my way or the highway kind of thing. And that's not good either, right? The line of what I call moving from the nice guy to the good man is very short. It's really about changing your perspective of why you're doing things, understanding yourself. So if you go back to the idea of the nice guy, has a fundamental belief that I'm unlovable, unacceptable just the way that I am. As a result of that, we tend to hide things about ourselves that we think other people would find unacceptable, right? So what I do then is we talk about how to become an integrated man. And an integrated man, okay, is somebody who likes himself, warts and all, understands his, he's got this shadow side and he's got this light side, and to be able to accept both of those pieces of himself and integrate that. And the way we work with integration is what I like to refer to as integrity work. Integrity and integration are similar words. They both mean, a wholeness. And integration or integrity, if you think of a wristwatch, for example, okay, so you have a watch and it's made up of all these springs and sprockets and cogs and whatnot. If you take one little sprocket and you bend it just a little bit, the watch ceases to work. It ceases to fulfill its purpose. And the purpose of the watch is to tell time. So once it's out of integrity, it stops its purpose. So integrity isn't just one thing, it's a bunch of things. And my new book that I just is actually publishing, it's going live this week, is called Finding Your Way Without Losing Yourself, The Path to Integrity. And I take people on a path of the way that you become an integrated person is you have to discover what your values and virtues are and make those part of your daily life. And so I talk about 16 virtues, a whole list of them all, but things like courage and loyalty and tenacity and self-excellence and self-control, justice, forgiveness, empathy. Those are just a few off the top of my head. But the idea is that we integrate ourselves with our integrity, okay? And when we act in integrity, generally what happens is we feel better about ourselves.
Right, right. So how do you do it? Reclaiming masculinity with integrity. Is there a process that you follow? Chuck, help us understand how does one do that? Because uh, it is very difficult, and I want to understand from you, why have we become this nice but actually not nice? What has changed from the earlier niceness to this? Who has done it? Have we done this to ourselves, or is it the society has made it like this, or is it something else? I want to understand that. And also, then when something has happened so drastically, how do you reclaim yourself? Because all the prototypes that you see, you will, very few of them you will find the real thing that you want to be.
Absolutely. Okay, so let me take the first part of that, which is, where did this come from? And I think it is a combination of a lot of things. Society, how we've just sort of evolved as a society and as a culture over the last, several hundred years. When you think about masculinity, okay, up until about 75 years ago, men and their sons worked together closely. We were agriculture, so the boys were working on the farm, working in the field, working with dad day in and day out. And there was a sense of bestowing masculinity to the son. And these can be things like the value systems of, hardworking, taking care of business, making sure your people are protected, those kind of things. And then what happened was, around the time of World War II, something changed. All right, the men came back from World War II, and they were given an opportunity that they never had before. They were given the GI Bill, which allowed them to go to college. Okay, so now we shifted from an agriculture society to more of one of industry. And what would happen then is the men, who also came back with a lot of PTSD, which we didn't even know what that was back then. And so they were isolating, drinking, and putting themselves into the job. What happened then is the boys of that grew up around strong feminine energies. All right. So their moms, if you think about, like, at least for me, all of my teachers were women. My mom was a very very feminine woman, right? And we were taught essentially, like, don't be like your father, the guy who has alcoholism and PTSD and maybe can be abusive and that kind of thing. But because the women didn't know exactly what masculinity was, they taught us to be more feminine, to be more inviting, accepting, to be more generous. And these are all great virtues. But what happens is we get out of balance, right? And when we're out of balance, we're not in that what I call integrity. So for example, we have masculine and feminine energies. All right. Now, if I worked out my right arm, all I ever did was work out my right arm, I'd have this really well developed right arm, but this skinny little left arm. Okay. And the point of it is we need to have both of these things. We need to have the masculine and the feminine. Most of us guys have a really well, nice guys specifically, have a really well developed feminine energy to themselves. Right. So the point isn't to get rid of that. The point is to develop the other arm, start working that out and get that in balance. So how do we do that? All right. There's a number of ways we do that. One is we have to first understand that there's a problem. Two, we've got to have we've got to want to change. There's a joke I like telling. How many therapists does it take to change a light bulb? One, but the light bulb has to want to change. And so you have to want to change. You have to realize that this isn't working. And then there are, you work with a coach, you work with a therapist, you work with men's groups are great. There's all kinds of men's group out there. And part of the thing is you can't go it alone. You really need other men in your lives that are helping sharpen you. So I think one of the first things that I always encourage guys to do is to get into a group of men. And if they don't have one, then start one. And in my book, I tell how you can start what I call the integrity group, where you can invite a couple of guys to get together and start sharpening each other. So, as far as like step 1, 2, 3, I would say accept, okay, have a willingness to change, and then get involved either in therapy, a men's coach, or working in a group of men. There's all kinds of great men's groups out there. The Mankind Project is a great one. There's others out there that help us men learn to practice more of that masculine side of ourselves.
Right, Chuck. Now, in a society as of today, when women are also seeking a lot of, things for themselves in terms of job opportunities, in terms
Right.
of equality, and so many other things, then how do you see men's masculinity, their struggle to reclaim the masculinity in them in these times? Because earlier it used to be more about man and woman. Now it is almost coming as if man versus woman.
Right.
And
Right.
it is across the world.
Yeah.
Nothing
Yeah.
harm in asking something for yourself, but it never should become, versus.
Exactly.
Even in, you see, man versus wild.
Right.
Man
Right.
and not man and animals. Earlier it used to be. So all things have gotten that twist towards versus. Help us understand about this whole thing,
Sure.
versus plus and.
Well, I think when we have a versus, what we're doing is we're saying one is better than the other. Okay. So there's this argument, which is better, masculinity or femininity? All right. And neither one is better. They're both equally as important. I think one of the things that happens, especially in today's culture, is especially here in the States, there's a very competitive nature that happens. And when you have a competition, right, there's a winner and there's a loser, right? So which one's better, i.e. the winner, and so if you have a winner, you have a loser. And this is what game theorists call a zero-sum game, okay? There's a winner and there's a loser. Now in game theory, there's another thing called a non-zero-sum game. In other words, there's no winner, there's no loser. It's either we all win or we all lose. So We have these things called escape rooms in the States here, where you go in as a group of people and you're trying to solve all these puzzles in a period of time so that you can escape the room. So we have to work together. Either we all escape or we all don't. And that's really more about what a relationship is like, is we have to work together, understand masculinity isn't better than femininity, femininity isn't better than masculinity, but they both serve a purpose. And when we blend those two things together, the masculine and the feminine. So for example, right arm, left arm, okay? I can do things pretty well with my right hand because I'm dominantly right-handed. I can also use my left hand pretty well. But when I use the two together, that's when I've got a state of flow. That's when I've got a state of working together. So the masculine and the feminine are very similar, a right arm and a left arm. The masculine and feminine work together to create connection, abundance, love, acceptance with each other. So it's a really great point you bring up, and we have to get away from this idea that one is better than the other, because when we say one is better, that means there's a loser and a winner. And when we go from a perspective of winner loser, we all lose. We need to be more of instead of which one's better, see the benefit in both of them and bring them into alignment with each other.
Right, right. If I understand correctly, even in those marriages, they say, "I now pronounce you man and wife." If I understand.
Yeah, yeah. That's traditionally kind of how it's been, right? I mean, that men have always been the dominating factor. You know, there's always been this hierarchy of the man. I mean, that in marriage, you know, for decades, it was about ownership of the woman. And I think that has set us up for the idea of like, you submit to me, I'm the one that's in control, right? And I think that there's a, you know, when you have that type of thing, you know, there's a natural sort of rebellion that happens, right? If you tell me what I have to do, I'm going to be like, no, I'm not going to do that. So when we have this competitiveness of, you know, man and wife, right? It's not husband and wife. It should be husband and wife, right? And 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 a balance that both are good, not an inequality that one is better than the other. I think that that's when we can start having better relationships. Oftentimes guys are really frustrated in their relationship because they want things, okay? Usually it's sex, you know, and um, and their woman, you know, is tired and she's been working all day, and that's kind of like the last thing she wants to do. And so as guys, we oftentimes get upset and resentful and, you know, almost childish, like I'm not getting what I want. And then we end up turning her into our mother, you know, that I've got to make mommy happy so that mommy will give me what I want. And that's just a really immature way to kind of go about, because we're adults, we're men and women, we're masculine and feminine. So it's really about understanding the balance and the interplay between the energies of the masculine and feminine. Neither is good or bad. They're both good. They're both, but in order to have good balance, you've got to have both of them working in the same way.
Right, right, Chuck. So your book, you know, Finding Your Way Without Losing Yourself, the Path of Integrity. Who is this book for? Is it for only these modernized guys, or is it that a lot of other people can use it?
I wrote the book with the intention of it being for a lot of people. Okay, so this isn't nice guy specific, but I think nice guys struggle with integrity. So I think guys who identify as nice guys will find a lot out of the book. But I also think men and women will, of any walk of life, can find this helpful. I talk about in the book my own personal struggle. I struggle with addictions and alcoholism, and that I was really suffering. And I started attending a program of recovery, Alcoholics Anonymous, and my sponsor said to me, Chuck, one of the reasons you're suffering is because you're out of integrity. And I didn't know what that meant. I heard the word integrity. oftentimes when I'm working with a guy, I'll ask him like, is integrity important to you? And they'll be like, oh yeah. And I was like, well, what does integrity mean? And they're like, being honest, or, following through. And I'm like, yeah. So that's, it's a lot of different things. It's this integration. But if we've never taken the time to look at what are my values, what are my virtues, where do I operate from? So the book really kind of acts a little bit like a roadmap. And what I do is I'm talking about how by studying and understanding integrity and living from that place of integrity, and you're never fully in integrity. I mean, you're always in and out, right? Because we're humans. But at least with the map, you can start finding your way back to what I would call just that authentic self. And so my hope for the book is that anyone who's ever found themselves lost, who's ever felt like, maybe they've been hurt, they've been betrayed, or maybe they've betrayed someone, that anybody who's ever felt like they don't know where to go, what direction, that kind of thing, they don't have a purpose in life, that this book will help them sort of uncover that and give them a path forward by living in integrity. And that's why it's called, the subtitle is Path of Integrity. It's a path, it's a map.
Absolutely. And what about your podcast? What do you talk in your podcast, The Recovering Nice Guy? Is it for all other nice guys, or it is also about you?
No, it's about me, and it's about nice guys. The podcast is more specific to the nice guy syndrome, because I talk a lot about, I talk with other men, or use my own experiences. I try to express to people, that there are things that you can do, in these videos. I typically give, kind of my opinion of, this is my experience. This worked for me. Try it on. If it works for you, great. If not, no harm, no foul. I just want people to understand that there's a path that can lead them out of the suffering of the ego and into more of a spiritual path of love, acceptance, and abundance. And that one of the things I talk about in the book is that integrity is actually a spiritual act, okay? Because you think about courage or honesty. It's not natural to be courageous. It's not natural to be, generous. It's natural to be selfish. It's natural to protect yourself, right? So the natural thing has to be overridden by something greater than nature, something supernatural. And that's the spirit from which we have within us, is that core of who we are. And when we tap into that, that gives us the power to overcome the nature's call to do the thing that actually ends up causing us, bigger problems. So my podcast is I think anybody who listens to my podcast will get something out of it. But because my focus has been on nice guys and working with nice guys over the last decade or so, the podcast is directed towards a nice guy, where the book, Finding Your Way Without Losing Yourself, is really directed at anybody who's ever felt lost in their life.
Wonderful. There is much to learn about masculinity, about relationships, about integrity. So, right. So for those people who would like to connect with you, understand more about it, more about you, what is the best way for them to do so?
Sure, yeah. My website's pretty simple. It's chuckchapman.com. My YouTube, also simple. It's at Chuck Chapman. And you can find me on all the regular podcasts, Spotify, Apple, that kind of thing. And I think if you just Google or just search for Chuck Chapman, Nice Guy Recovery, that'll show up there.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed.
Thanks for having me. This has been great. Thank you.
Thank you.